Hi everybody, welcome back to Marie's Kitchen. I'm so glad you're here. I've gotten so many requests about how to make a double crust pie where you have a crust on the bottom and a crust on the top and they're sealed together and some air holes in the top. That's what we're doing today, and I really do appreciate your requests, so thank you so much for sending them along. I love hearing from y'all. So the plan today is to first make my flakiest pie crust. I'll show you how to roll it out and assemble the double crust pie. As for the filling, I'm demonstrating an apple pie, but this same technique works for chicken pot pie, berry pie, or whatever other flavor you have that needs a top and a bottom crust. All right, let's get started. Okay, first up, we'll make my flakiest pie crust, and I am gonna make it in my food processor. If you'd prefer to make it in a bowl with your hands or a pastry cutter, check out my easy pie crust tutorial by hand. Or if you'd like to make it in a KitchenAid stand mixer, check out my easy pie crust tutorial where I show you how to make it in a food processor, in a stand mixer, or by hand. So first up, we have 1 1/4 cup all-purpose flour, and that's 170 grams. Next up is 1 tablespoon sugar. For savory crusts, I use more like a teaspoon. Then my secret ingredient is a 1/2 teaspoon baking powder. That'll give your crust some puff and also give it a little more structure, which really helps in the bottom, especially if you often get a soggy bottom crust. Next up is 1/4 teaspoon kosher salt. And that is the dry ingredients. I'm gonna give that a quick spin. Now I'll grab the butter, which is in the refrigerator. So what I have here is 1/2 cup unsalted butter. It's 113 grams. And I'm just gonna cut that into about 8 pieces. We'll just throw that in. And you do wanna keep the butter cold, like I did, leaving it in the refrigerator until you're ready to use it, because you really want cold pieces of butter in your pie crust. When you have cold pieces of butter in your pie crust and you roll it out, those little pieces of butter melt and let off steam. It will create flakes in your pie crust. So now we'll pulse this about maybe 8 times. Next up, I have 2 tablespoons vodka. Yes, vodka. And I've gotten a lot of different responses to including vodka in my pie crust, but it really does help for several reasons. I won't go through them all, but basically it kind of inhibits the production of excess gluten, and you don't want a lot of gluten in your pie crust because you want it to be soft and easy to roll out and easy to handle and not pulling back together and not getting tough. So the vodka actually really helps with that. So that's why we use it. Next step is 3 tablespoons cold water. And if you prefer not to use vodka, feel free to use just water. You can also add a tablespoon or swap out a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. The vinegar helps as well, similar to the alcohol. Okay, we'll pulse this a few more times. So you just want to peek in here and make sure that all the big pieces of butter, anything bigger than an almond, is cut up into smaller pieces. Because while having pieces of butter in your pie crust helps, you don't want to have giant pieces. If that happens, it's just going to melt and create a pool of butter, which is a mess. So you can see those are in kind of smaller pieces. And that's it, we made our pie crust. Now I'm gonna take some Glad Press and Seal, or you can use saran wrap, put sticky side up like this, and give this a flip, like that. And this avoids getting your counter all messy. Now we are gonna have flour and pie crust going everywhere when we roll it out, but this does save at least a little bit of cleaning. So you can make these crusts really quickly like this. We'll bring them together with the plastic wrap. Then I give it a twist. And there is your homemade all butter pie crust. It's just that easy. And you can see those pieces of butter in there, so you know we're gonna have a nice flaky crust. Now this goes in the refrigerator for up to 2 days. If you'd like to make it further in advance, you can make it up to 2 or 3 months in advance and leave it in your freezer. If you leave it in the freezer when you're ready to use it, simply take it out the night before, let it thaw in the refrigerator overnight, and then you're ready to roll it out. All right, I'm gonna put this one in the fridge. You'll want to leave that in the refrigerator for at least 20 minutes. Better is an hour, even better is overnight. What you're doing is letting the butter firm up and also letting the gluten rest. That is going to make it easier to roll out the pie crust. If the gluten's really tight after we've been working with it, it's going to be hard to roll out. So we'll let that chill, and I'll see you back here in about 20 or 30 minutes. Okay, the crust is nice and cold. It's been in there chilling. You can see it's actually pretty hard. Now, this is going to be too hard to roll out. It's too cold. So we're going to let it sit on the counter for about 5 minutes, and it'll warm up just enough so we can roll it out. In the meantime, let me tell you real quick, we're going to use a 9-inch Pyrex pie plate. These are really simple and I love them. They have a nice lip on the edge, which I think is really key to creating a beautiful pie. So if you don't have a pie crust with a lip, I do highly encourage it. It's a great place to set your decorative edge. Otherwise, we'll just need rolling pin. This one's very simple from Amazon. I can put it in the description box. It works great. It's lasted me for a long time and it's super affordable. You'll also need a little bit of flour on the side to roll out the crust. Okay, it's been about 5 minutes, so you can see how this is a little more pliable. That's what you're aiming for. Now we'll sprinkle a little flour, and then first I'm just gonna press it out a little with my hands like this, pressing nice and hard, just trying to flatten out the crust a little bit. Now you can see the cracks here. That's no problem. Do not worry at all. That just means you haven't overmixed your pie crust. So a few cracks are a good thing. As Leonard Cohen said, that's how the light gets in. And I've always loved that. So you can see this is in a nice round circle. Now, when you're ready to roll, you'll put a little bit of flour on your rolling pin. And then we're going to roll and turn and roll and turn. The reason we're doing roll and turn is because, first of all, we don't want it to stick to the counter or the mat. If that happens, as I've seen in many, many pie classes, it is very hard to get up. So you don't want it to stick, and turning it every time will prevent it from sticking. And then also, if it does start to stick, you'll feel it real quickly. So you can just toss a little flour under there and make sure it doesn't stick. So that's one benefit of the roll and turn method. The other benefit is that it will help you keep your pie crust in a nice round circle. If you're just rolling like this, you're much more likely to end up with some weird shape that may not fit very well in your pie plate. So we'll just roll and turn. I love making pie crust. So relaxing for me. It's like my brain just kind of shuts off and I'm just all in the moment. If your crust is just really dry, it's not able to roll out, there's patches of flour, that probably means you didn't add enough liquid. So you might want to get either a liquid measuring cup like this, where you can more easily see 5 tablespoons of either water, or it's the 3 tablespoons water and 2 tablespoons vodka. So the liquid measuring cup works. Or if you have a scale, you can also measure your liquid out that way. You know, put your measuring cup here and add your liquids, and it should total 75 milliliters. Okay, to measure, to see if you're done rolling out, you'll take your pie plate, hold it upside down on the crust, and you want to have about 2 inches all the way around. Now we'll just fold the pie crust in half, set our plate here. This one says Pyrex right in the middle, so I'm just going to set the crust right on the Pyrex word, and then we'll unfold that. And there you have your pie crust in your pie plate. And now we'll set it down into the pie plate. You'll see I'm not stretching it into place. I'm just kind of setting it down. Very nice. Now again, this is going to be the bottom crust for a double crust pie. So the first thing we're going to do is take the edge here, and I don't cut off any, I just leave it all on. I like a really big, thick outer crust. So what we're going to do is just fold it under itself like this and rest it on the lip of the pie plate. Now, if you come to a section that is really bulky and it just has a lot of extra crust here, then you can pinch that off. Like this feels pretty bulky, so I might go ahead and pinch a little bit of that off. And if you get to a place where you feel like, gosh, this feels really thin compared to this over here, well, you can take your extra, and if you want to pop it in there, you can. Okay, then we'll just kind of flatten this out, just using my fingers to flatten it out and make it nice and even. Now here is our pie crust fitted into our pie plate. We're going to leave it in the freezer while we roll out our top crust. Now you can make this a day before, or as I mentioned, a month or 2 before. You'll wrap it double in plastic and put it in the freezer. And then when you're ready to use it, you just take it out, let it sit on your counter for about 15 minutes so it will be pliable enough to add a top crust. So this is going in the freezer while we roll out our top crust. Okay, now it's time to roll out our top crust. And I just remembered one question I've been getting a lot is, can I just double your recipe and make 2 crusts at one time? And I don't like to do that. I much prefer to make 1 crust, one after another, one at a time. And there's really 2 reasons for that. The main reason is that it's a lot easier to mix in the butter and water without over mixing when you're working with just 1 crust recipe at a time. And the other reason is it's a little bit hard to evenly split a double crust ball into 2 separate crusts for the top and bottom. If you mismeasure, if you misestimate and one is a lot bigger than the other, then you're gonna have trouble when you're trying to fit that into your pie plate. So for those 2 reasons, I do like to make them one after another, one at a time. So a little flour on the mat as before, and then I'm just gonna press it out with my hands. This one's not as cold, so it goes a little faster. And then we'll roll this out. Okay, there we have our top crust. So I'll set this aside. We'll grab our bottom crust and assemble the pie. All right, so I got the bottom crust out of the freezer. It looks great, but it's nice and cold. And then this is my apple pie filling, and I have a video on this as well. I do pre-cook or kind of partially cook the apples ahead of time, but here is our pie filling. It's been chilling, and this is another thing you can do ahead since you do make it, pre-cook it. It's a great one to do ahead, and you can freeze it. So if you want to start making your apple pie filling for Thanksgiving, it's a great time to start. And then I'm going to use a spatula to sort of gently press it down because you don't want to have a lot of gaps in your filling. So we're going to kind of press it down. And pre-cooking the apples definitely does help with avoiding gaps as well. If you've ever made an apple pie and when you go to put it in the oven, it looks beautiful, and then you go to cut it and there's like a huge gap between the apples and the top crust, that's because if your apples aren't cooked, they're going to sink and your crust stays in place, and so that's why you end up with that big gap. Pre-cooking avoids that. Okay, this looks good. Now we'll take our other crust and doing the same thing we did with our bottom crust where we just fold it over like this, and then we'll move this over to the center of the pie and unfold it. Oh, isn't that beautiful? So pretty. So we have this edge around here, and while I usually don't cut off a lot, there is plenty here. We don't need quite this much. So I just go around and tear off a little bit. So what we're gonna do with this top crust is fold it underneath the bottom crust. See how the bottom crust was resting on that lip there? We're gonna take the top crust and fold it under that, like this, and then it forms into 1 crust. Today's a school holiday, so there's kids everywhere, there's pets everywhere. All kinds of fun going on. And this actually is for a friend of mine in the neighborhood. It's his birthday and his wife asked me to make him a pie. I do it every year. Pies are his favorite. So I'm not going to taste this one, unfortunately, at the end of this video because it is going to a friend. So I'm just tucking it under. Look at that. Okay, there we have our double crust apple pie. You can see it's all sealed around the edges. Now we'll just put the holes in the top, and I do want to preheat my oven. So I'm going to set that to 415 degrees. Now we'll take a sharp knife and we're just going to make 4 slits in the top of the crust, and that is to make air holes so the steam can escape. And look at that. It's off center. No problem. Okay, now we can make a decorative edge. To do that, it's a little bit different with a double crust pie because you've got all this filling here in the center. I usually use my knuckle and 2 fingers to create the edge, but since I have the filling in there, I'm going to use my forefinger and my 2 fingers on my left hand, like this. So you just press it in between the fingers, like that. Or you can use your thumb for a little even wider gap. If it gets sticky, just put a little flour on your finger. And you can kind of pull these out a little bit so they're nice and big and fat and resting on the lip. Okay, now we'll make our quick egg wash. For that, I'm going to use 1 egg. And then we'll add about 2 teaspoons water. Now we'll give this a quick whisk. And my favorite part, getting to paint on the egg wash on top of the pie. Now sometimes I strain it, makes it a little easier to work with. You don't get all these stringy bits, but today I'm just moving quickly, so I'm not going to strain it. Okay, this looks good. And then I'm going to use my knife just to make sure these are still all the way through. And the final touch is some sugar in the raw. Just gonna sprinkle that on top. It gives it a little extra sweetness on top. It also adds a little sparkle. Okay, that looks great. Okay, now we'll set the pie on a parchment lined baking sheet. You always want to bake a pie or even a pie crust on a parchment lined baking sheet because the butter will drip down, and rather than have that in your oven, it's much easier to clean up when it's just in the pan on the parchment. Now, you don't want to leave this here for a long time because what's going to happen is the filling is going to start to seep into the crust, which is going to start to get really warm and really soggy. So it's very important to, as soon as you get your pie assembled, either put it in the freezer or put it in the oven, but don't let it sit out at room temperature. So we're going in the oven. We'll bake this in the oven at 415 degrees for 20 minutes. Then we reduce the heat to 375 and bake for 40 to 50 minutes more. And you know it's done when it's very golden, a deep golden on top. And also hopefully you can see some bubbling through the air vents. When it's bubbling, you know it is cooked through. Plus, since we've already pre-cooked our filling, you don't have to worry about that quite as much. So this goes in the oven. Okay, I think the pie is done. It smells amazing in here. My daughter came in and said it smells like Christmas. So isn't that sweet? Okay, I'm gonna grab the pie. Oh, wow. This looks amazing. What a pie. It is big, it is so golden, it is just glistening with all the sugar on top. You can see some of the sauce is the juice is kind of leaking out, which is just, I think it looks so luscious. And you can see there's some bubbles in it, so we know it came to a boil, it was bubbling in there, so we know this is good to go. We can test the apples, that's always a good idea. Grab a toothpick and make sure this goes in nice and smoothly. Yep, feels good. Well, this is beautiful. As I mentioned earlier, I think I did, this is actually for a friend in the neighborhood. It's his birthday and his wife asks me every year to make a pie for him. So this is his pie. So I just wanted to use it as an example to show you how to do the double crust pie if you want to do that for apple pie, chicken pot pie, berry pie. Technique is all the same. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Be sure to like the video, hit the hype button. If you haven't yet, subscribe. I have lots more videos coming up and I don't want you to miss any of them. For this recipe and more, head over to my website, mariesaba.com. It's my new favorite apple pie is what it's called. And then my flaky pie crust is the recipe that we used. You can print those out over there. And if you like, put them in a notebook and start your very own Marie's Kitchen cookbook for free. I hope you learned that with the right ingredients and the right techniques, making a homemade double crusted apple pie is easier than you think. All right, we'll see you next time.